Women in Synod. Warum sollten Sie zuhören? Julia Knope, weil wir einen Kulturwandel im deutschen synodalen Weg anstoßen, der in der Weltkirche
to be listening to me because there's a cultural change in the church, and it is high time that this change happens, because first-hand information we're currently receiving by women that had experiences are really important. Joanna Müller, I actually commit myself towards the Synodal way because over 10 years' time, I wouldn't like to be ashamed of my church. Good evening, guten Abend, buonasera, buenas tardes. Women in Synod, experiences from the Synodal way in the Church of Germany. This is today's topic. The Synodal process until 2023 in Rome actually faces the topic of women in the Church, and we cannot rule out these topic. There are plenty of signs for full inclusion and equal opportunities for women. And it's important that nobody is excluded. And also, with reference to the final Synod of the year 2023, women are asking for equal opportunities, equal rights, and they want to speak up. Some time ago, a Filipino sister said that the issue of women is more and more important for the church, and today it could also be a more important topic if we are able to offer an alternative to the Roman process. So let's have a look at the Synodal way in Germany. There's a request to implement radical changes there. The women who are attending this meeting today are going to talk about this way in Germany, how we put it into practice, and what they're awaiting from this way, from this path. Even though Pope Francis highlighted that the church is not so democratic and we're not talking about a parliament, women today are going to tell us what the concrete and practical role is they have to play in their synodal way. Women in Germany, do they have a right to vote in the synodal way? Is it possible that parishes, bishops, lay people can all talk on a level playing field? Well, sometimes this process appears to be slowing down. We're going to listen to different anecdotes, and I ask a question. The question is, the synodal way, can it really play an important role? Can it really set an example for the world church? And as the Vatican should actually take an example from these ladies, Julia, Johanna, and Esther. Welcome to this platform, Voices of Faith, which is a platform that gives voices to women. And I'm looking forward to listening to your witnesses.
Mit 18 Jahren. Ich freue mich sehr, dass wir heute hier sein dürfen.
I'm the youngest one here. I'm only 18 years old. I'm really happy about being here. It's really fascinating, all this internationality. I'm a student. I've just finished school, and I'm very active within my community in the church here in Germany. That way, I reached, I started taking part in the synodal process. Now over to the next speakers.
Esther Göbel und ich arbeite als Pastoralreferentin im Erzbistum Berlin.
Hello from Berlin. I'm Esther Göbel, and I have a peculiar job in Germany. And in Europe, well, I actually have a position that is not widespread outside of Germany. And I'm dealing with women who study theology and then followed a different training path for 2 or 3 years as a pastor. So basically, we are women that are like priesters. We haven't been ordained. We are lay women. But so that's the reason why we say the synodal way is there. So we are here. There are also some married men that play a role and fulfill different functions as women do. And that's what we would like to talk about here, at least in Germany, even though there is no formal recognition, but it's an important role. And from a professional point of view, I am a woman pastor within the church.
Ja,
And
einen
now
guten Abend
over to
auch von
Julia.
mir aus Erfurt. Mein Name ist Julia Knope. Ich bin
Good evening. Good evening from me too. I'm Julia Knope.
Erfurt.
I teach dogmatics at the Faculty of Theology of our university, and I too participate in the synodal process in Germany. I'm a delegate to the General Assembly and member of Forum number 1, focusing on power and the separation of powers. So I've been participating in the synodal process right from the beginning. It's really good to be here. Maybe it is not so usual for women to teach theology, probably, but I know people, I work with people at my university who are going to be priests. I can contribute to their formation and training. However, I'm not a woman priest, but there are movements in Germany, openings which have their limitations, of course. So the three of us this evening will talk about the synodal process, the synodal way in Germany. So at the beginning, I will tackle, I will talk about how this synodal process started, which actually started before the official synodal process launched by Pope Francis. So what is the Catholic synodal process in Germany? This is something really new. This is a new way. So it is not, there are women and men, religious, lay people, laymen and women who will talk about the future of the church in Germany. And there will be decisions made, and then these decisions will have to be implemented. Then, of course, I expect us to have difficulties, but that is another story. Now, this is a consultation process between religious priests and lay people. So it is important to focus on the themes of this process. Let me share my screen. I hope you see my screen. Here you see a picture of a study, a 366-page study, the MHG study on sexual abuse on minors, perpetrated by deacons, priests, religious men, religious within the German Bishops' Conference. So here you can see the former president of the Bishops' Conference of Germany, Cardinal Marx, and the other one is in charge of studying sexual abuse within the church in Germany. And this study is quite an extensive one. And this is the basis for the synodal process. It was published back in 2018, and then it was analyzed, focusing on sexual abuse on minors on behalf of clergymen. Now, the personal files of people were considered in this study. And with this study, we are facing the tip of the iceberg as far as the sexual abuse in the Catholic Church in Germany is concerned. And an analysis is conducted about the quantity and quality of this kind of the data relating to sexual abuse, and if there are specific factors within the church that can favor this kind of abuse. So the characteristics of the abusers, and there are narcissist priests who abuse their power in terms of sexual harassment. And many of these people, their mental development is equal to that of a teenager. So there are psychological factors to be taken into account to avoid abuse perpetrated by church people and priests. So it is about the way we conceive a priest in his way of being. And as to sexuality, homosexuality is still a taboo, which is a great problem. And that was back in 2018. Now, this study was presented at the Bishops' Conference. There was, a legendary press conference, and every bishop was just shocked. They just didn't know what to do or what to say. And 6 months later, they gathered again for a day of study on these topics, power, the ministry of the priest, and sexuality. And I was there too. I gave an introduction to that day of study. There were 69 bishops, all dressed in black, then 4 observers, and myself. I was there in front of all of them, moderating the debate, and it was quite an intense debate in this context. The idea was born of a synodal process, a synodal journey. And at that moment, it was March 2019, and it was really clear to me that we cannot be judges and analysts at the same time. We need lay people. Lay people in Germany are very well organized. We had the Central Committee of German Catholics in Germany, which unites different associations. And so the Bishops' Conference decided to invite the Catholic Central Committee to embark on this synodal journey. And the topics were power, the ministry of the priest, and sexual morality. And we said we are going to participate only if women, the topic of women will be included in the agenda. We're not there to say the whole word, of course, but it was important to include women. At the universal level, there are lay people and bishops in dialogue. And now let me give the floor to Esther to explain a little bit more of this.
Ich werde jetzt noch mal kurz darin einführen, wer da eigentlich jetzt genau in dieser Synodalversammlung.
I'm going to make a short introduction about who was present at the Synodal Assembly of the different groups that are there. And I'm going to talk about the different relations existing among the different groups there. As you can see, there's a chart here. First of all, on the left, you can see 69 bishops we have in Germany. So you can actually see the leaders of the different dioceses and the consecrated bishops. And we're talking about 69 bishops. So they all have equal rights. In blue here on the top right of the screen, we can see 69 lay people coming from the German Central Catholic Committee. So we're talking about a group which is made up of people that are enjoying the same rights, and these two large groups that started their synodal way, they added other groups, so other groups were invited, so they joined this, and you can see them portrayed here in orange. And from the different councils of the bishops of each diocese, each diocese could send a priest, and here in green we have 15 seats for Catholic young people. So we're talking about people that at the beginning of the Synodal Assembly were younger than 30 years old. For example, Johanna was the youngest in the group. These 30 young persons were selected by, so they were selected, they could submit their membership, and then there are 10 seats for other religious persons of other orders. I actually do not know what the selection criteria were. Probably there were elections or different procedures to elect these 10 people that are portrayed by light blue. And then we have 4 seats for permanent deacons, and then 4 representatives of the professional association of pastoral reference persons. So we have a pretty complex system that is focused on equal rights. So it is important that we have the same number of the young people, of elderly people, and that there is a whole representation of the German population, also depending on the different professions. So we actually tried to depict a varied framework, frame. And then here we can see that there are 3 seats that are taken up by professors of the Catholic religion, and then 3 other seats for the new spiritual communities. So I do not actually know what criteria were used and what the participating communities are. And then we also have 2 seats here for the general vicars of Germany. And what you can see here in this chart, well, it does not include the representatives or the observers of the council that was elected during the synodal process. So these observers joined at a later stage. I think it's 27 of them right now. So it's 3 men that experienced sexual abuses by priests and that they are fully committed on the different fora. They can speak up, so they can actually discuss with us too, which is good. And you can also see here that the share of religious and lay people is pretty balanced. Of course, it's not quite representative because otherwise there should be many more lay people the number of bishops would have to be much larger in order to represent a real ratio of things, but that wasn't possible. Nevertheless, we thought it would be important to have different representations of the different groups. We thought it would be important to involve as many people as we could, but it goes without saying that it is not faithfully representative of the German church. As far as women are concerned, well, probably it wasn't quite clear looking the group, but there is 1/3 of women represented in this council. So for our decisions, we envisaged a majority of 2/3. And since women of the whole make up only 1/3, so it could be that there are some decisions where not even one woman voted in favor of those decisions. So we already pointed it out at the very beginning of the synodal way. We said, well, it's not possible to have such a rule. We need to prevent it. And so that's the reason why at the beginning of the synodal way, we presented a request. So we went through a very complex procedure, and in the end, we ensured that at least upon request, it would be possible to have the requirement of 2/3 of agreement by women in order to make a decision, so that we can avoid that women go unnoticed and they're not perceived, and that they, in the end, can have a greater influence. With regards to the climate of the plenary assemblies, well, Johanna will talk about it. Over to you, Johanna.
Besonders neu in so eine Versammlung zu kommen, weil ich ähnliches.
It was really quite a new thing to participate in such an assembly. It was my very first time. But well, I think for the other participants too, it was quite a new experience. Now, I'd like to tell you how I experienced this. Something interesting was to see, the culture in the debate when we are there discussing. So I'd like to share with you some images to make a comparison. On your left-hand side, you see an image of the 2015 Synod of Bishops, and then on your right-hand side, you see the assembly in October this year. So it is much more colorful and mixed, and I think it's nice, isn't it? So I think we can make a good comparison. Of course, you cannot make a direct comparison because these are two very different contexts. Now, the first time I was sitting next to the president of Caritas, a priest, and then I was sitting next to a young person, and the third time I will be sitting next to another person. It is very nice because you get closer to one another. In the end of the assembly, we share about what we think about, certain topics, and our impression, our feeling was that this is a very new situation, because they're kind of forced to mingle with all of us, even if, I don't know, in some cases, maybe they don't even want to, but they are accustomed to other kinds of meetings. But I do believe that this is a process of learning for all of us. This is a very nice ambience to work in. We can learn, we can improve things this way. I am convinced about this. As to the role that young people can play, that is also very interesting. I'd like to share with you how I got there to that assembly, because it is not that obvious. In December 2019, I had the chance to turn to an association of young Catholics that that is in coordination with other youth associations in Germany. So I applied as a participant because I was really interested in giving my contribution. I actually did not expect that I would, sit at that assembly. But then in January, I was able to participate in the first assembly together with 14 more young people. Now, what's the role of young people within this assembly? What is the contribution we can make? Well, I can speak from my own perspective. Then those older than myself will have another way of seeing things. But I think that young people contribute with their perspectives and the contributions of youth associations and the culture of the assembly. Well, they know how to vote, to table a proposal, a suggestion. There are many young people who are very active in the associations world. And what I do appreciate is the networking among young people. We all have our own identity and opinions. That is normal, but the fact of going there as a group gives us a stronger voice. Then we can also convey in a better way our messages. Networking is incredibly important, because otherwise such big assemblies just overwhelm you, and it has resonance also in the media. Social media, are our thing. We have Instagram, our Instagram profile, Facebook, and I was interviewed quite a few times because apparently it is very interesting to hear the voice of young people, and I feel really grateful for that. Now, as to the distribution, the allotment of the votes and the delegates, the question is whether the perspective of those aged less than 30 years is really included and heard. I hope so, because it is the future of our church that we're talking about. So there are 15 people. I think that is a good number. With this group, we can be really present already. One last thing, the themes. What is a culture that is brought forward by young people? Thinking about my own group, we come together quite frequently. We exchange our opinions and we try to focus on the main topics of the assembly. I think we are quite strategic in our dialogue, in our way of acting. We always try to understand the seriousness of the situation. The MHG study on abuse, we've also tackled that study because it is so very important. Of course, many details go just lost, but our task is also to provoke, to stir a reflection. Sometimes we don't realize that we can claim, our rights. It is important that our voices are heard and to focus on these topics without getting lost in the details. Now, to see how young people consider this assembly, the synodal process, the synodal journey, how is it considered by young people and everyone else? Well, for that, I like to hear from our other two speakers.
Was macht den synodalen Weg besonders? Wir sind
Yes, thank you. So what's so peculiar about the synodal way, the synodal path? We are currently activating a new culture based on debate. So it's important to have common conversations, a common dialogue. It goes without saying that it's difficult sometimes. Some things fire back. Sometimes we are having problems, but we already started it, and we cannot go back, even though our voice is not that strong. The new standards are being born, and I think there are two strong groups within the Synodal Assembly. Well, we have young people. Jonna Müller already said that. Youth can actually talk about very hot topics that probably sometimes wouldn't even occur to us. The church probably never discusses these topics. And the other group, the second group, is women, even though they only represent 1/3 of the group, but they represent a very strong and important voice within this assembly. And we have a discussion culture which is pretty powerful. And the main obstacle is this sometimes. So being able to converse, to have a dialogue. I also worked within the German Bishops' Conference, and I saw that there were different mechanisms. Sometimes you didn't have time limits for your reports, whereas in the Synodal Assembly, we have a very short time frame. There are specific agreements about the way we talk to each other, and we also receive feedbacks with rounds of applause or with green and red cards. So when we actually are able to discuss at the same level, then, well, this is our objective. This is what we would like to achieve. We want it to be a normal experience without fear. It's also a challenge in a way. It's a challenge that concerns each one of us, everybody that is committed and that needs to take a stance. We're still learning. It's challenging, it's difficult, it's complex, it leads to conflicts, but at the same time, we are learning democratic culture of discussion. What do you think, Esther?
Well, I wrote an article on our blog precisely about this theme. We are learning a new language, two languages, the digital language and the synodal language. So I'd like to say that we also learn to discuss, to debate in a democratic way. So the synodal journey, this is a new style. It didn't exist before. This is where you learn how to walk. You first crawl as a newborn baby, and then you learn to walk. And I'm also thinking about the pandemic. With the pandemic, we started using the digital world like never before, and many assembly meetings had to be cancelled to do the pandemic. Anyhow, we were able to keep on working thanks to the digital tools available. So I think that has partly to do with the average age of the participants, as well as the world we live in. So I think that the church is not necessarily at the vanguard as far as the digital tools are concerned. So those of us who have learned a second language know how difficult it is to learn a new language, and to learn two new languages, well, that is even more difficult. But in the last assembly, we could see that some of the standards that are obvious in a democracy, well, within the church are not that obvious. And that makes the situation more difficult. However, I can see that we are making progress. And something that I notice is that I think that the group of the bishops has changed a bit, and I hope that they will keep on changing through this process. The German bishops were perceived as the German bishops bloc. Now they are there is not such a strict division, so you see, among them and us. There are many different stances, including among the bishops themselves. They're not as unified as they used to be. They take a stance in a more powerful way now, which is quite positive. And these bishops, well, of course, I'm not saying that everything has changed, but I can see little changes being made. So, and also during the breaks, the coffee breaks, you go there, you talk to them. So there is no such block as it was before. So yes, there are different stances, but they're not connected to specific groups. There are dynamics and barriers. I don't know if you wish to expand on that.
Aspekte, die ich ergänzen kann. Vielleicht, was noch die
Yes, there are a couple of points I would like to raise, especially as far as the culture of dialogue is concerned. Yes, in this case, we're talking about two worlds that are coming together, and you can actually see these throughout the whole way, as Esther just explained. Sometimes it's quite difficult to engage in a real dialogue with 230 people when you have a whole list of speakers. There's also the need to be able to respond to the speech of a speaker. Some of these speeches are completely different. Some of them, they have very long reports that exceed their speech time. And then we also have other speeches that are more spontaneous, more emotional, and that also move the whole dialogue and the whole issues forward. Sometimes some speeches just are there, hanging in the air. Some others, they are welcomed by many people, and there are young people in our federation, that in our association, that also talked about the option of using green and red cards to express their support. So we see that everybody within the room is taking part in the discussion. Some others, they feel somehow annoyed in the debate, also because of the use of these green and red cards. It's just a small sign. It's also a matter to see how, as much we're talking about a spiritual topic, because sometimes they use a red card to express an opinion, or a green card to express an opinion. Well, this is probably sometimes not really clear, even though we think it's important to show to use this system of the green and red cards. So we are somehow trying to find a way that is able to overcome all these pressures or these obstacles. We heard how the Synodal way came into existence. We didn't have anything before. There wasn't a structural or organic approach to come to the plenary assembly to understand what our abilities were, what our possibilities were. And now I could move to the second point, but probably Esther wants to talk a bit about these different topics.
Yes, we've heard already that there are many topics that are tackled in the synodal process, the power, the separation of powers, the sexual moral in the church, how this is lived in the relationships, and the third topic, the lifestyle of the priests, and then a fourth theme that is women who can take up roles within the church of the future. So these four fora are quite mixed under the guidance of a bishop or another person, in this case, lay people. The four of them are lay people. At the beginning, it was 30 members in this forum appointed by the presidents. Now, I don't know what the process was, who decided that we had to be 30, and that says something about transparency, right? But we've been presented with these four fora with 30 people, but I think that the presidency had, established criteria to have a composite group with religious men and women, or priests, lay people who could contribute with their specific know-how and competencies. But this non-transparent procedure of composition of the forum made that the assembly was a little bit contrary to that, because this is the situation. If we calculate 4 fora with 30 people, it will be 120 people, but it is 130 of us there. There are many synodal participants who could have participated in some of the fora, but didn't. So now, at the practical level, I can only say that our forum on power the way we work, at the beginning, we dealt with different topics, but then there are smaller groups focusing on more specific aspects. Now, due to the pandemic, we had to modify, to change our whole way of working. But we kept on working via Zoom. We would draft a proposal and then pass it on the other group members and then voted on it. Then it would be shared with the forum assembly, with these 35 people. We would discuss the proposals extensively, and then we would vote within the forum on a specific text. And if the text was approved, it would be submitted to the Synodal Assembly, so that the Synodal Fathers could, consult on that text. Now, it is not very clear who does what, but we must say it. In our forum, there is no bishop really who has participated in the drafting of the text, and this is a pity, because things are often said with such an energy, and everyone was convinced, but then the bishop said, no, this is not the right way to go. And so thumbs down, he will give us a thumbs down. And then it was said that this is a good, it is not a good way of working. The bishops could and should participate more. Now, another thing which is not very easy is that the bishops work full time and we support them. We all do, on a free basis, of course. Basically, we're all volunteers. Now, how did we get to these texts? If there is a consensus, or how these texts are not always perfect, but there's a fight really sometimes, so that we can get a consensus on what is written on paper. And then maybe there is a small minority who does not agree with the orientation of the process. Whatever the text, they're against. And that is a very small minority of people. It's like 3 people out of 30, just to translate this into numbers, into figures.
Eine kleine Seitenspur unseres synodalen Weges mittlerweile gibt, dass diese ja doch tatsächlich zahlenmäßig.
There's a parallel journey to the synod, but the Bishop of Raspon, he has his own homepage with his own texts on the synodal process published by him himself, which were not agreed upon during the fora on the synodal way. And these texts come from this marginal group, which does not agree with the structure of the synodal structure. So this bishop, Johanna, would you like to say something more?
Genau, ich habe hier einmal ein Schaubild.
All right. Well, you can actually see an overview. We're not talking about contents in this case, but probably it's easier if we have a look at these in order to understand how the synodal way works. So this chart has been created in order to show you the results of the latest synodal assembly we held, what's the objective, what kinds of texts we needed to work. There's still some texts that are being drafted. We are in the second reading of some texts. I'll explain later what this is about. So first, there's an introduction of the presidency, explaining how we got there, how we got to this path, what the main foundations are. Then there's a text here in the green box. It's a guidance text that somehow widens the topics. It deepens the different topics, and it lays down the foundation of other texts that we found in the yellow boxes. So the approach to the sacred texts, the theological foundations that make up the basis of all other texts. Then we have 4 texts in the yellow boxes that represent the different forums. As I was talking about, they work on different topics. It's forums working on different topics. They present the relevant topics. They highlight the theological rationale, and they lay down the foundations of specific topics in themselves too. Then on the left, we talk about power and the separation of powers. So we drafted the basic text, and after a reading, probably in February, we'll be able to agree on a new version of the text. And we also already drafted other texts in order to act with priests and lay people about what we can do in Germany. As a matter of fact, in Germany, a layman can, or a layperson can hold the Holy Mass, but also the participation of bishops is another topic, or the continuation of synodal structures we are following. And then below, we can see that there are many points in common among the different forums, which is one of the main difficulties of this structure too, because sometimes it's difficult to start a dialogue, to initiate a conversation, because many topics are being shared by different forums. So we do not have a fixed structure, but sometimes it's more people that are actually getting in touch with peoples of other forums. And then I can explain what the current situation of the different texts is. Apart from our basic text, there is also another text of Forum 2 about priests, and then there's another text about sexuality and priesthood. And they are now about to undergo a second reading. So we can already say that they already passed the second round. We need to agree upon these texts that need to be approved so that they can later be submitted. And then also the texts for the implementation texts that need to be approved by the Synodal Assembly, and they are about the openness towards women, for women to be for a female priesthood, and then the admission of women to theological faculties. So these texts were highly rated with very high percentages. So we actually said that these texts were widely welcomed. So this is very important. And we'll see during the next assembly what the next results are going to be. And now I would like to explain what's happening next.
Lesen können, aber was vielleicht trotzdem einen Eindruck.
I'd like to show you something too, which gives us an idea of our way of working. Well, Johanna has already mentioned this. We have a basic document which we have decided upon with a large consensus, and we kept on improving it. Then we shortened it because it was too long, and here you can see how this text is formed. I'm not going to dwell on this, but let's just focus on the titles. Maybe you can read them even if you do not speak German. In all the titles, you see the word wir, W-I-R, which means we. We as in we, in a plural sense. We together talk about the decision-making processes. This word we has to do with, people discussing and deliberating, making decisions together. This is to show you that these texts are supported and signed if we are all in agreement. It means that one is available to go on a journey together. And these texts are our starting point by which we ask the bishops to draw their conclusions, also, in terms of the power that they have within the church. During the Forum 1, which deals with the powers within the church, a power on finance, for example, on the pastoral edification. This power should be transparent and shared among all, because it's pointless to listen to the bishops who wants to follow what is proposed by lay people if that is not really implemented and realized by the bishops. So we are sort of guaranteed that these structural changes are really made, because we need an ecclesial communion and transparency and the subdivision of the division of powers. The responsibility is a task that goes bottom up, and we need to respond to who's on us, like the bishops, and the bishops need to refer to and report to the Pope, but not the other way around. We would like to have this to invert this trend within these structures, because we need a division of power that is transparent, and that these studies and an investigation is clear and transparent, because this study on the power of bishops showed that there have been and there are still abuses that were hidden, and many abusers were protected. In the first part of the text, we say that we are right in the middle of a crisis, and within the church, a crisis of the institutions, of the roles of the clergy, and all that was hidden. The guilt and the of the bishops and the clergymen. And then secondly, we say that we have understood that as to the institutional level, we need to respect, everyone needs to respect our rights within the church, and then the standards as far as human rights are concerned for a participatory church. And that goes hand in hand with our being Catholics. So we are Catholics, we want to stay Catholics, but Catholicism should be, up to the time, the culture of our time. And then we speak of the different roles and competencies within the church, different criteria like transparency, participation, gender equality, sustainability, to dignify people within the church, the election of the bishops, the access to these roles and offices, because the fact that only men can become priests or bishops, the gender equality responsibilities, this should be realized at all levels, the level of the parish, the diocese, the bishops' conference, in all fields of the ecclesial life. Also the liturgy. Now our text is very long. We made a huge effort to make it readable also to those who haven't studied any studied any theology, because the point was to create a text, to draft a text that could be understood not only by experts in theology, a solid document that is valid. This is not just a simple theology, you know, the text is there to create standards that apply to the universal church. We want to network internationally so that all the faithful can receive these texts and study them. In January, we will try to publish a briefer version of this, a shorter version of this text to be disseminated. On the homepage of the Synodal Way, I'm going to give you the address in the chat box. Well, on this website, you can find information on the people participating in the Synodal Way, processes, photos, events, dates, and these documents are all public. So there is basic information in all languages. We're still waiting for some translations. We can still improve on this, because, you know, our texts are disseminated at the international level. And for example, in the United States, our text was taken into consideration, but in a unilateral way. So it is very important to have quality documents, but they should be documents that can be easily translated in order to become universal.
Ich würde noch ganz kurz eingehen auf die Frage des Kirchenrechtes.
Well, I would like to talk very briefly about canon law. There are many things, especially on forum number 1, which is about the separation of powers. Well, we see that many things are evolving, especially with regards to canon law, that is to say, the existing law that we would like to take advantage of in a positive way. Of course, we're also dealing with topics that go beyond canon law. And this allows us to see what the limits are, and we can also question those limits. And we can actually say that this law needs to be reformed and reviewed sooner or later. So, and different forums deal with different topics. I'm going to give you an example, to set an example. For example, forum number 1, which is about the separation of powers, and it's also about reporting with a top-down approach. And within priesthood, well, in many cases, we're talking about a reporting duty. And I want to make reference to point. Probably this is a problem that we caused ourselves because we were somehow lacking within the congregation. It was as if we wanted to remove celibacy, or as if we wanted to abolish priesthood, but that's not what we wanted to achieve. It came down to the fact that priests also were given other opportunities to lead their life different from celibacy. So what does it mean? It means that if you feel attracted, or if you feel attraction for a life of celibacy, of course, you have to be given the possibility to do so. But for those who have a vocation as a priest, but also another vocation as a husband, for example, or as anything else, then, and if they feel to be able to lead other lifestyles, that they should be given this chance. As to women, we've been talking about the importance to achieve gender equality. And so we want to go beyond the existing canon law, in this case as well, because we want women to be able to have access to all positions and offices. And within the synodal path, we needed to convince our bishops, and we would like that to say that this is our objective, this kind of request within the forum, that's our objective. As to sexual morale, it's and a further development of morale concerning sexuality. So there are different forms of leading our way. If these forms are denied, and if these lifestyles do not match our idea of morale, then this is a limit. This is a current limit, and we want to move these limits further, because our lifestyle, our culture is changing. It's not that everything needs to be automatically negative or needs to be considered in a bad way. Also within the pastoral care of our church, we want to see more love, we want to see more positivity, and not only condemnations. The most important tool for us, the most important tool we have at our disposal is that as German church, of course, we cannot change the whole global church. We do not expect that everybody's doing these everywhere, and that other churches do what we do in Germany. And so we need to have to ensure some kind of self-correction, and that's what we're trying to do. So we are just giving insights, perspectives, and we do not want to impose new rules for the whole church, because just because in Germany we do so, that everybody else has to do the same as we do. Johanna, over to you.
Was wir haben oder was wir zumindest verwenden wollen, weil wir glauben.
Well, these are the tools that we have available, but we think that we have, good chances. This is what we have available from a legal point of view, but there is a great risk. We put the decision making in the hands of the bishops. Even if we do not want to, they should, commit themselves to doing some things. And so that depends on them and their willingness to do things. As to the synodal way, the decisions are not binding throughout Germany. A decision is made by the two-thirds majority, but then it is not necessarily applied all over Germany. And there are things that the bishops can accept or reject. And this is the risk. And the same risk applies to the things we can decide in Germany that have to do with the universal church. So what we can do is pray, really, and tell the bishops if they agree with the text to represent this stance before Rome, in Rome. But this is also something we cannot force the bishops to fight for us, and this is frustrating sometimes. But what we need to consider, this in order to not to lose the harmony, and to talk about the synodal way from another perspective too. I'd like to see what we think about this synodal way.
Im Chat, ich hoffe, dass wir die auch noch gut thematisieren können.
We actually came to the end of today's session. I see there are plenty of questions about about the current situation. It's true, bishops have power, but there's also structural level there. So they can have power, but there's also a moral constraint in a way. And we're talking about two different levels that need to be combined between them. Otherwise, we will always be stuck in a culture of obedience or in a unculture of obedience where bishops can always hide. But we need to take a stance, and we need to be active within our dioceses and at level of the global church. In Germany, I think that we have a wide majority that is in favor of the contents of the synodal way, and it's a clear majority we have there. And then there are different colleagues of mine. I have different colleagues that somehow feel disillusioned. They feel discouraged. They said, we've done so many things, we debated, we've been talking and talking, but we didn't achieve anything. Also elderly people in Germany, not only people that are dealing with theology, and people that say, but what do you expect? What are your expectations? At the same time, it's clear that there are some apparent and clear topics, but they're not applicable only to Germany, but to the whole world. We have the power, we have infrastructure, we have the intellectual know-how. We also have lay theologians that face and deal with these topics, and they commit themselves. And this is also a great responsibility for our country, but also for the global church. We need to promote these topics. And we also have colleagues in Eastern Europe that say, keep on, we have the same problems, but we do not have the right potential. We do not have the strength to implement structural changes. So we need to be realistic about that in our synodal way. So we need to ensure that bishops are able to speak up, or that are able to take a stance themselves, and that they are individually recognizable and not as a small part of a larger group of bishops. So they need to be recognized by Rome, and we feel as if Rome is not much of an interest towards the synodal way. Our requests sometimes go unanswered. We made some attempts. We tried to talk to the presidency of the synodal way. We said, let's go to Rome and see. But then sometimes it's not only bishops, but also lay people that are involved. So we suggested that we would have a high-level meeting with the laity, but this approach sometimes is not accepted by some others. So we said we also postponed the global synodal way because we wanted young people, women to be, and elderly people to be there. We wanted them to attend. We wanted them to have rights. And so there's sometimes some disappointment, but there is also new hope, new networks, a new perspective as we saw tonight. So it gives us courage so that we can overcome obstacles, and these topics will disappear somewhere and nobody takes care of them. So we cannot accept these attempt at silencing all these topics.
A question that I concretely asked myself when I participate in the synodal way: why am I doing this? What's my expectations? What's my hope? Well, what I hope for my pastoral work, daily work, because I live this tension each and every day. On the one hand, I'm representing this institution, the church. I'm a collaborator to the church. On the other hand, quite often I realize that the teaching of the church, as to my own convictions, what I've understood the message of the church to be, is in contradiction with this. So it is a very subtle, the line is very subtle between what I believe in, what I try to offer people, and this stop sign, in front of me. So we are limited, we are stopped. The magisterium of the church reminds us always that there are things we just cannot do. There is this stop sign, and it is difficult. I hope this balance will be easier to attain in the future. As a pastoral collaborator, as a woman in this church, I also feel very free to work, to follow my vocation, but at the same time, structurally speaking, I feel disadvantaged. So there is this tension in myself. I would like to have a new approach in order to live in a more relaxed and peaceful way. But on the other hand, as to such problems as gender discrimination, I feel this tension because there is the practical work, the practical pastoral work, everything that the church says. I do not agree with everything that is said, but we ourselves, we as Catholic Church, should and could live more according to the gospel, with our laws, with our structures, our magisterium, to be more like Jesus, to proclaim something, to proclaim something with our lifestyle. Sometimes there is no correspondence between what we hear, what we read, what we study, and then people's lifestyle. Johanna, what's your hope? You already mentioned something tonight, but what would you like to see differently in 10 years?
Well, it's always a good question, actually. Well, first of all, I think that, well, I do not have clear expectations, because I noticed straight away that nothing is binding in a way. There's nothing binding, there's nothing clear, there's no clear-cut idea of how we have to do things. It's not clear to me what's possible. It's not that I'm not committing to myself, or that I have my own fights and struggles, but it's hard to understand what we can achieve and what we can't. And especially at the beginning, because when you're 16, you're quite naive. And even when you're 18, well, now I'm 18 and I'm still naive probably. But I think that over the last 2 years, I learned a lot, and I was able to have some experiences that enable me to have better judgment. I can say what's decisive for the future. Over the last few months, I realized that with regards to our forum on power, that the standards we have in our modern society, in our free society, the standards we have in Germany, and everything that I'm currently experiencing and seeing with my classmates and among youth, well, I realized that it's completely normal what we see there. And the church has to be up to the task. So we needed to have clarity, transparency, gender equality, but all of these needs to be rooted and has to be based on a solid base. And we have to have minimum rights. This is a big topic for the church. I know maybe it's too abstract, it's not concrete, but it's a huge topic. And it's really incredible that we're still working on that. And we still needed to work on all of these topics. So I actually think that from over 10 years time, everything will be better, but I do not think that everything is going to change. It's a very short period. And yes, it's good. I know that I'm young and that I can still experience many changes. I can still meet many people, committed people, or people that have been committed to these cause for a long time, and they are already in the second half of their life. And I can still experience many things, which fills me with hope, and I wouldn't like to lose my hope. Chantal, over to you.
So Chantal, I would like to ask Johanna, do you have this hope that this church will be existing in 10 years' time?
Kleiner sein. Also ich glaube
It
auch,
won't be as it is today, it will be smaller. I'm convinced that if we think about the last 5 or 10 years, the developments that there have been, I do believe that everything will be different in 10 years' time. I'm not saying that the church won't exist anymore, but there are too many people believing in the church, and so they believe in the church as a community.
An Julia, wenn du sagst, die Bischöfe haben die Macht, aber sie
There is
können
another question for Julia. So when you say that bishops have the power, but they can be empowered too, they can be authorized. So what do you mean exactly? Maybe it could also be applicable to Rome, right? Yes, that's the big difference between institutional or power, institutional power that allows me to have an authority. I've been assigned and so that I can act in a convincing way. So the term power can take on different meanings, and in the church in Germany, at an institutional level, we try to maintain a given basis. Also on the part of bishops, they are trying to take some decisions, but there's no resonance sometimes. It doesn't matter what bishops are saying. There's no echo sometimes. So we actually realize that there is a lack of authority, a loss of authority, even though the power structure still exists. And I think we can stop this process only if some people are empowered or they are authorized and they rely upon the support of their bishop, and they can turn into a listening ear. We need these voices to be heard in a powerful way, and these voices need to be the first voice of the believers, and this calls for change of our reference. It's not more the
von denen, die ihm vertrauen,
prince or the ruler, but it's a person that through the people who put their trust in him, let themselves be led. They turn into a voice of their own feelings, and that's the structural approach we need to start. There's a central role to be played by some norms. Right now, the institutional power structure, as Esther said, it's really self-reference. So it's as if, a bishop could take a decision on himself, but he can't. And then he says, I oblige myself to be part of a group to be defined. And if, for example, all women do not agree, then I won't do it. This is an approach that depends on a person, it depends on the benevolence of a person. That person can act that way if they want to, but I don't think that changes won't start from a desk. That changes do not start in a legal framework, but they always start from reality, and this reality is being upset. So this structure is being upset, and something is definitely going to be originated also from a legal point of view that will entail many changes.
Hören.
Well, what I think is that all that we hear and see from the outside, well, in Germany, the synodal way is still dividing the church. And we know it is not so, but what if your bishops gave this step forward with this reform that you're working on, what would happen in Rome in that case? Well, I think people will feel fear. We feel that there is a dynamic now. We're not just talking, you see, it is not just chit-chatting, and we will see what happens, but everywhere such processes are being activated all over the world. So there is a will to create something culturally, but it is not going to be a revolution. It is something dynamic. I have a question. How did you do so that the synodal way could be created nationally? In England, they say that every diocese is autonomous and the decision-making is not unified. So is the lay people voice heard nationally?
Schon gesagt, aber vielleicht noch mal kurz zusammenfassen.
You probably already said that, but we can sum it up. We can sum up what we said before. Yes, also in Germany, it's like this originally, initially, each bishop, each diocese is in a different situation. There are some differences. So each individual case, in each individual case, different decisions can be taken, but there are also the German Bishops' Conference that also has a given responsibility and acts in their way, and that has existed for over 150 years. We also have these Catholic Central Committees. So we have a national group with a long-standing tradition and history. So in my opinion, it really fostered and promoted this process. Also the Bishops' Conference. It helped also the Bishops' Conference and also these Central Catholic Committee was always engaged in a dialogue with them. Sometimes I say, it's as if they were a couple that have been together for a very long time. They are quarreling all the time, but they cannot be without each other. So it's two large groups, two structures that are advancing this process, and without them it would be quite difficult. And I would also like to add, it was highly necessary because bishops didn't know how to move forward. I saw that in Lingen. So it was as if it was a relief or a liberation when this idea came about, because everybody's got the same problem in Germany. We have different studies about horrible abuses in Germany, and no bishop is unscathed. So they are somehow connected with each other in good and evil in the search for a solution to these need, and this need led to the birth of this process. So probably, yes, it's not a luxury, and it's really important to have such Central Catholic Committee. that is mutually supporting each other. So, and probably in other countries, we do not have such a phenomenon. So it was rather fortunate. And now another question. Well, I see that many women are able to speak up during the synodal process, and that they acquired some expertise. How important is to have these expertise in this field?
Vor allem, wenn man auch darauf achtet,
Wow.
wer sich in den Foren engagiert, wer die Arbeit macht. Das haben wir
If
vorhin
we see who's involved, who works in this fora, well, we've already said that before. They're volunteers who already work within the church, some way or another. However, they're not ordained people, so they don't work within this synodal way due to the job they do, but just because they hold this way, synodal way, dear, close to their hearts.
Nicht vorhanden ist und wenn sie in den Texten niedergeschrieben ist, es sind keine Einzelmeinungen.
With their texts, I mean, they can write and share their opinions. It is never the single person. It is a group work, and that is mirrored in the text itself, the text that is drafted. So I would say that these voices, mostly as far as women and young people are concerned, they can exert quite a strong influence. They stress on the fact that the debate and the dialogue must go on, and the know-how, the expertise you mentioned is extremely useful, because you know, there must be sound theological basis. One more question. From the point of view of priests, do you know how the priests who do not participate in this process feel? How do they feel?
I can answer to that. Of course, I do not know. No, I do not know, but I think I can say that priests are like bishops, and there is not only one opinion or the opinion of priests, but also in this case, we see different groups, we see different opinions, we see different currents, we see different approaches too. So we do not know what's happening outside of the Synodal Assembly, because we also have the representations of groups of priests, and in each group there is at least one priest that joined it or that joined those groups via other groups, and so we know how they're working with us on the different forums, so we get to know them over time. So there's a bit of everything. That's normal though, isn't it? Okay, then one final question. There was a Swiss delegation in Rome, and when they came back, they said that the Pope said that we need even more time. What is your reaction to this? So what are we waiting for? What is the Pope waiting for? What's your opinion about that? Well, I think the same as we say women in Switzerland. We waited and waited. We've been waiting for this for a long time, since others started to ordain women as priests, so we've seen some changes in the field of rights. So we do not have the time to lose anymore. The future of the Catholic Church needs to be faced with this question, because this question is fundamental. It will determine its destiny, the destiny of the Church itself. Equal rights is a fundamental right, and the Church needs to take a stance. Yes, yes, I agree too. And I would ask this question: what else do we need to wait for? So what else are we waiting for? It's already late. Johanna? Same opinion? Yes, I think everything has already been said. So if we do not start now, well, in 10 years, we're sure that nothing will have been achieved. All right, so thank you very much. We're going to wrap up this discussion, this debate. It was really interesting. I would like to thank you all. It was a start in order to get an idea about the Synod, which is something that already exists, and to understand the reason why we need to learn. So I'm wondering, why can't we learn from each other? We always have to reinvent the wheel. There are so many examples of synodal processes, and those with the least experience in Rome, they think they have to start something from scratch, but there are already good examples. So they should probably collect the experiences that were made somewhere else and apply them at universal level. Thank you very much to the interpreters too, and thank you very much to the listeners. It's been very demanding, so thank you very much to the interpreters, to the team of Voices of Faith, and thank you very much to the audience, and I wish you a nice Christmas holiday period, and I'll see